Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you a question. Have you ever stared at your phone, waiting for that one text back? Minutes feel like hours and the silence grows louder. You start to wonder, did I say the wrong thing? Do I even matter to them? This is now a world where communication is instant, but connection feels fragile. And when the reply doesn't come, it's easy to spiral. But today we're not here to dwell on the silence, we're here to rise above it. Expectation, the silent thief. Expectations are powerful. When you send a message, you expect acknowledgement, affirmation, maybe even a spark. But when that expectation isn't met, disappointment rushes in. Here's the truth: unmet expectations aren't a reflection of your value, they're a reflection of misaligned realities. Stop letting external silence steal your internal peace. It's the psychology of communication. We live in a swipe right, double tap world where attention feels like currency. And let's be honest, when someone doesn't respond, it can feel like you've been devalued, but their silence isn't about you, it's about them. Their priorities, their focus, their world. You can't control their actions, but you can control your reaction. Emotional intelligence, the key to freedom. Reacting emotionally to not being texted back is human. It's a signal of your need for connection. But emotional intelligence teaches us to pause, reflect, and ask, what am I feeling and why? It's not about suppressing the emotion, it's about understanding it. When you master your emotions, you become unshakable. Reclaim your power. Let me be clear, your value doesn't decrease because someone fails to acknowledge it. You are not defined by a response or a lack thereof. When you place your self-worth in someone else's hands, you give them control. Reclaim that power. You are the author of your story, not a character waiting for someone else's approval. Resilient communication habits. Great communication is a two-way street built on mutual respect and understanding. If someone's silence becomes a pattern, ask yourself, am I investing in a connection that respects me? And if the answer is no, it's okay to walk away. Resilience is knowing when to stay and when to let go without losing yourself. From disappointment to growth. Every unanswered text is a moment of clarity. It's not rejection, it's redirection. Use that silence to grow stronger, to reflect on what you truly want in your relationships. Instead of asking, why didn't they respond? Ask, what is this teaching me about myself? So here's the bottom line: not being texted back isn't a setback, it's a setup for a breakthrough. It's a chance to shift your mindset, reclaim your power, and build stronger, healthier connections, not just with others, but with yourself. The next time you're staring at that phone, remember this: the most important message you'll ever receive doesn't come from someone else, it comes from within. Now go out there, own your story, and create the connections that truly matter. Because this is now, and now is the moment to take control. Thank you. Expectations are a subtle but powerful force in our lives. When we send a message, there's often more behind it than the words on the screen. Maybe it's a joke meant to lighten the mood, a heartfelt question to show interest, or simply a casual hello to maintain a connection. But beneath all of that, there's an unspoken expectation or reply. That expectation is what drives the action in the first place. And when that reply doesn't come, something starts to stir inside us. It's that creeping thought that I say something wrong. Am I not important enough for them to take a moment to respond? The truth is, expectations are at the root of that discomfort. We expect people to value communication the way we do, to prioritize the things we prioritize, and to behave in ways that mirror our intentions. But when they don't, the gap between expectation and reality creates friction, often leading to frustration or even self-doubt. The thing about expectations is that they're largely invisible even to ourselves. They operate quietly in the background, shaping how we interpret the world. We rarely stop to examine them, but they're there, influencing our emotions and reactions. The disappointment we feel when someone doesn't text back isn't really about the silence, it's about our unspoken assumption that they should have responded. That assumption may seem small, but it holds immense power over how we feel. Here's where we need to take a step back and challenge ourselves. Are these expectations serving us, or are they setting us up for unnecessary disappointment? When we tie our emotional state to someone else's actions or lack of actions, we give away our power. We let their choices dictate how we feel about ourselves, but the truth is, their silence doesn't have to mean what we think it means. Consider this: the person on the other side of that message may be dealing with their own challenges. Maybe they're overwhelmed with work, distracted by personal struggles, or simply not in the mindset to engage in a conversation. None of that has anything to do with your worth or the value of your message. It's a reflection of where they are, not a reflection of who you are. This doesn't mean we shouldn't have expectations in relationships. Healthy relationships thrive on mutual respect and communication. But it does mean we need to differentiate between reasonable expectations and assumptions that place our emotional well-being in someone else's hands. When we approach communication with an open mind, one that allows for the complexities of other people's lives, we free ourselves from the grip of disappointment. Expectations, when unchecked, can be thieves of peace. But when we become aware of them, we regain control. By shifting our mindset, we can learn to approach situations with curiosity instead of judgment, with patience instead of frustration. And in doing so, we take a powerful step toward emotional resilience and personal growth. The way we communicate today is unlike anything humanity has ever experienced. With a single tap, we can send a message across the globe, bridging vast distances in seconds. This instant accessibility has changed not just how we connect, but how we expect connection to unfold. It's as if communication has become transactional, where every message is a deposit and every response is the return on that investment. When the return doesn't come, we feel robbed of something intangible: our time, our effort, maybe even our value. But here's the thing: the way we perceive communication is heavily shaped by the technology we use. Texting, messaging apps, and social media have created an illusion of immediacy. If someone has their phone, why wouldn't they reply right away? It seems logical, but this assumption ignores the human side of communication. On the other end of the screen is a person with their own emotions, priorities, and distractions. Just because the technology is instant doesn't mean their ability to respond is. This gap between the speed of the tool and the pace of human behavior is where misunderstandings often arise. When someone doesn't text back, our minds start to fill in the blanks. We create stories to explain the silence. Maybe they're mad at me, maybe they're ignoring me, maybe they don't care. These stories often reflect our insecurities more than they reflect reality. The truth could be far simpler: they're busy, they forgot, or they're dealing with something that has nothing to do with you. The real challenge lies in how we interpret that silence. Many of us equate attention with value. If someone is quick to respond, we feel prioritized, appreciated, even important. But if they don't reply, it can feel like a rejection, as if their silence is a direct commentary on our worth. This is where we must step back and recognize the psychology at play. Attention and value are not the same things. A person's delay or even failure to respond doesn't diminish your worth or the significance of your message. It simply reflects their current circumstances. Yet, because communication through technology lacks the nuance of face-to-face interaction, we're left with only the raw data, no reply. Without tone, facial expressions, or context, we're prone to misinterpret. To navigate this, we need to adopt a healthier perspective. Instead of rushing to conclusions, pause and remind yourself that silence isn't inherently negative. It's neutral. It's what we attach to it that gives it meaning. By consciously reframing our thinking, we can shift from feeling neglected to understanding that communication is complex, and not every interaction will go the way we hope. Modern technology is a tool, but it's not perfect. The human beings using it are even less so. By recognizing the psychological traps we fall into, we can free ourselves from unnecessary frustration and instead foster a more balanced, compassionate understanding of what it means to connect in today's world. Emotional intelligence is one of the most transformative skills we can develop, especially in relationships and communication. At its core, emotional intelligence is the ability to understand and manage our emotions while also recognizing and respecting the emotions of others. It's what helps us navigate the complex interplay between what we feel, what we think, and how we act. When faced with something as simple as not being texted back, our reaction can often reveal just how much emotional intelligence we've cultivated and where there's room to grow. When we don't receive a response, it's natural for emotions to bubble to the surface. We might feel hurt, frustrated, confused, or even anxious. These feelings aren't inherently bad. They're signals your mind and body's way of telling you that something feels off. But where emotional intelligence comes into play is in how we interpret and respond to these signals. Without self-awareness, it's easy to spiral into reactive patterns, assuming the worst, sending follow-up messages laced with irritation, or retreating into self-doubt. The first step in emotional intelligence is recognizing the emotion. What are you really feeling? Is it disappointment because you were excited to connect? Is it insecurity because you're questioning your importance to the other person? Or is it frustration because you value prompt communication and feel it's not being reciprocated? Naming the emotion gives you clarity, and with clarity comes choice. Instead of being ruled by your feelings, you can pause, reflect, and decide how to move forward. Next is understanding the root of the emotion. Emotional intelligence pushes us to ask why we're feeling a certain way. If you're upset that someone didn't respond, is it because their silence touches on a deeper fear of rejection or abandonment? Often the intensity of our reaction isn't just about the immediate situation, but about past experiences or unmet needs that the situation brings to the surface. This self-reflection can be uncomfortable, but it's also where growth happens. Managing your emotions is another critical aspect. This doesn't mean suppressing them or pretending they don't exist. On the contrary, managing emotions is about acknowledging them without letting them control you. For example, instead of sending a message like, "Why haven't you replied?" in the heat of frustration, you might decide to take a step back, give the other person time, and focus on your own well-being in the meantime. Equally important is developing empathy, the ability to see things from the other person's perspective. Emotional intelligence reminds us that other people's actions or inactions are rarely about us. The person who hasn't texted back may be overwhelmed, preoccupied, or simply unaware of how much their silence matters to you. By extending empathy, you shift from judgment to understanding, which helps you respond with grace rather than resentment. Ultimately, emotional intelligence equips you with the tools to handle the ups and downs of communication in a way that strengthens rather than damages your relationships. It teaches you that while you can't control others' actions, you can control your response, and that's where your true power lies. Reclaiming your power is about understanding where your sense of worth comes from and ensuring it isn't tethered to someone else's actions or decisions. When we send a message and don't get a reply, it's easy to fall into the trap of overanalyzing, wondering what went wrong, and questioning our value. This reaction is often rooted in the mistaken belief that our significance is determined by external validation. But here's the truth: your worth is not defined by someone else's responsiveness. It's defined by the value you place on yourself. When we allow someone else's silence to dictate our emotions, we give them control over a part of our lives that should remain firmly in our own hands. It's as if we've handed over the remote control to our happiness, letting their actions, or in this case, inactions, change how we see ourselves. Taking back that control requires a conscious decision to separate who you are from how someone else behaves. Their failure to respond doesn't diminish your value, it reflects their current priorities or circumstances, which may have nothing to do with you. This isn't about ignoring your feelings. Disappointment, frustration, or even hurt are valid emotions when expectations aren't met. But reclaiming your power means acknowledging those feelings without letting them define you. It means recognizing that you are complete and whole with or without someone else's acknowledgement. Their response or lack thereof is a reflection of their world, not a measure of your worth. One of the most empowering shifts you can make is to focus on what you can control. You can't force someone to reply or dictate how they engage with you, but you can control how you interpret the situation and how you choose to move forward. This doesn't mean suppressing your desire for communication. It means balancing that desire with the understanding that your happiness and self-esteem don't depend on it. Building internal validation is a key part of this process. Ask yourself, am I looking for a reply to feel appreciated, validated, or seen? If the answer is yes, it's a sign to turn inward and provide those things for yourself. Self-worth is like a well, it needs to be filled from within, not from the outside. When you cultivate self-respect and confidence, you become less reliant on others to meet emotional needs that are ultimately your responsibility. Taking back your power also involves setting boundaries. If someone's pattern of communication consistently leaves you feeling undervalued, it's worth reflecting on whether this relationship aligns with the respect and reciprocity you deserve. Reclaiming your power doesn't mean cutting people off hastily, but it does mean being willing to walk away from dynamics that don't honor your worth. In the end, reclaiming your power is about living from the inside out rather than the outside in. It's about recognizing that your sense of self comes from within, not from external responses. When you embrace this truth, you free yourself from the emotional roller coaster of waiting for others and step into the confidence of knowing your value is non-negotiable. Building resilient communication habits is essential in a world where messages fly back and forth with unprecedented speed. In the age of instant messaging, it's easy to fall into the trap of expecting immediate responses and mistaking silence for disinterest or disrespect. But resilience in communication isn't about suppressing your needs or pretending you don't care when someone doesn't reply. It's about cultivating habits and mindsets that promote clarity, mutual respect, and emotional stability. One of the first steps in developing resilient communication is recognizing that healthy interactions are built on mutual respect. This means understanding that every person has their own rhythm of communication and it won't always align with yours. Some people respond quickly, others need time, and some may not prioritize texting at all. Instead of demanding conformity to your expectations, resilient communication involves accepting and respecting these differences while also being clear about your own boundaries and needs. Another critical element of resilience is learning not to take silence personally. When someone doesn't respond, it's easy to assume the worst, that they're ignoring you, uninterested, or upset. But the reality is often much simpler. They may be busy, distracted, or dealing with their own challenges. Resilient communicators resist the urge to catastrophize or jump to conclusions. Instead, they give the other person the benefit of the doubt, maintaining an open mind until more context becomes clear. Clear communication is also an essential part of resilience. If you find yourself repeatedly feeling hurt or frustrated by someone's communication habits, it's important to address the issue directly and respectfully. For example, you might say, "I've noticed that sometimes I don't hear back from you for a while, and I want to make sure everything's okay. Is there a better way for us to stay in touch?" This approach focuses on understanding and collaboration rather than blame, creating space for both parties to express their perspectives. Resilient communication also involves setting realistic expectations. Texting and messaging are often informal forms of communication, and they don't always convey the same level of commitment or urgency as face-to-face interactions. By adjusting your expectations to match the context, you can reduce unnecessary frustration and focus on what truly matters, building meaningful connections rather than fixating on the speed of replies. Equally important is knowing when to step back. If you find yourself repeatedly investing energy into a relationship where communication feels one-sided or unreciprocated, it may be a sign to reassess the dynamic. Resilience isn't about endlessly tolerating behaviors that make you feel undervalued. It's about having the strength to walk away from patterns that don't honor your time and emotional investment. Ultimately, resilient communication is about balancing patience with self-respect. It's about fostering interactions that are grounded in trust, empathy, and mutual understanding, while also protecting your emotional well-being. By cultivating these habits, you create stronger, healthier connections and free yourself from the stress of misinterpretations or unmet expectations. Resilience in communication isn't just a skill, it's a mindset that transforms how you approach relationships in every area of your life. Disappointment can be a powerful teacher if we're willing to approach it with the right mindset. When you don't get the response you were hoping for, when someone doesn't text back, it's easy to feel dismissed, ignored, or unimportant. But what if that moment of silence wasn't rejection, but an opportunity for growth? What if every emotional challenge, every unanswered message, held within it a chance to strengthen yourself, refine your approach, and deepen your understanding of relationships? At first, silence can feel personal. The lack of a response seems to suggest something about you, your message wasn't compelling enough, you're not important enough, or they don't value the connection as much as you do. These thoughts arise naturally, but they are rarely accurate. People's actions or inactions are usually more about their own circumstances than they are about you. Transforming disappointment into growth begins with shifting your perspective. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" try asking, "What can I learn from this?" One of the most valuable lessons that silence can teach is the importance of self-reliance. Often, disappointment stems from placing too much of our emotional well-being in the hands of others. When we expect external validation to affirm our worth, we're setting ourselves up for vulnerability. True growth comes when you realize that your value doesn't depend on someone else's response. By focusing on building internal validation, cultivating self-respect, self-confidence, and self-awareness, you free yourself from the emotional roller coaster of waiting for others to meet your expectations. Disappointment also provides an opportunity to reassess what you truly want in a relationship or connection. If someone consistently leaves you feeling undervalued or unacknowledged, it may be a sign that the relationship lacks the mutual respect and effort necessary to thrive. Growth sometimes requires letting go of relationships that no longer serve you, even if it's difficult in the moment. When you release what isn't right for you, you create space for connections that align with your values and desires. This process isn't just about setting boundaries with others, it's also about setting boundaries with yourself. It's about choosing not to dwell on things outside your control and redirecting your energy toward what you can influence. For example, instead of replaying the silence in your mind, you might decide to focus on activities that bring you joy or people who actively invest in your life. Growth comes when you stop trying to force outcomes and start focusing on nurturing your own happiness. Finally, transforming disappointment into growth means embracing the discomfort of these moments as a catalyst for self-reflection and resilience. Ask yourself, what is this experience teaching me about my expectations, my needs, and my ability to adapt? Every challenge you face is an opportunity to develop greater emotional strength, patience, and self-awareness. In the end, an unanswered message is just that, a moment of silence, not a verdict on your worth. The true power lies in how you respond to it. By choosing growth over resentment, reflection over self-doubt, and resilience over despair, you turn every disappointment into a stepping stone toward a stronger, wiser, and more confident version of yourself. Navigating the silence of an unanswered text is about far more than the message itself. It's about how we manage our expectations, emotions, and the stories we tell ourselves. It's about recognizing that our value isn't dictated by someone else's response and learning to separate their behavior from our self-worth. Through emotional intelligence, we gain the tools to pause, reflect, and respond with understanding rather than frustration. Communication in today's world is complex, shaped by the speed of technology, but grounded in human unpredictability. By building resilience, we learn to honor both our needs and the boundaries of others, fostering relationships that are built on respect and clarity. And when disappointment arises, as it inevitably will, we have a choice to let it define us or to let it grow us. So the next time silence fills the space where a reply was expected, take a moment to breathe. Let it be a reminder that you hold the power over your emotions, your worth, and your growth. Embrace the opportunity to reflect, adapt, and strengthen yourself. Because in that moment, you're not just reacting, you're evolving into someone who communicates with courage, confidence, and compassion. Remember, every interaction or lack thereof teaches us something. The key is to listen not just to others, but to ourselves, and use those lessons to become the best version of who we are meant to be.